Hello YouTubers, Troz here again, and today I'm going to show off some of my minecart station and track designs. On the multiplayer servers that I play on, I like to build minecart stations and tracks connecting all the points of interest. I've become quite good at it, and a lot of people have asked me what designs I use to build my carts and station. So this is going to show you how I do it. So this is the first station. It's a very simple station. It's kind of I use at the end of a line. Basically, you can put your cart down here, get in, press the button, and your cart goes shooting off like so. Now this has a dispenser at the end that you can press the button to get a cart. If you don't have one, you just have to make sure to keep it filled with carts. Otherwise, you won't get one. Let's collect this minecart as well. Now, if you don't know how this type of station works, when there's a booster track that is not powered, minecarts will stop on it. So, like if we unpower this track, if you have a cart here, it'll stop. Now if you power that, nothing will happen. And why that is because there's two ways for the cart to go, so it doesn't know which way to go, so it doesn't go anywhere. However, when you have a block on one side, there's only one way for the cart to go now, and so when you push the button, it will take off. So that's how this type of station works. You can build it more simply, ignore the line here going back, but just like this without the dispenser. But this, just a little more work and a lot more functionality. So the next type of station I like to build is what I call a two-way hill station. This station you could build on a long line where you just want a place to stop and get off, but you also want the option to continue going on further on the track. It works in either direction. That's something I should mention. Most of the time when I do build tracks, I just build them with one track going to each place with the intention for two-way traffic to flow on that track. The multiplayer servers I've played on don't really get that much user traffic on the track, so collisions really haven't been a problem. You can build two-way tracks with two tracks next to each other, or maybe separated by a block. And you can also make methods of combining and separating two-way traffic to one-way traffic. And I'll show you examples of that a little further down the line. But usually I build my cart tracks to to anticipate or to use two-way traffic on a single track. Alright, so I'll show you how this hill station works. Basically, there's a sensor track here that powers the uphill track. So your cart comes, you come up the hill, you stop on the downhill part, and if you want to get off, you just brake your cart, or if you want to continue going, you look over your shoulder and press the button, and that will then, through the redstone, power the track on the downhill, and you'll be sent on your way. On most of my stations, I have an extra powered rail at either side to make sure you're going at full speed as you leave. So let's see how that one works. So you go up and over, and then this is no longer powered, so you stop on the downhill, and then you can just push the cart button to be sent on your way. One thing I should mention here is I almost always use two powered rails on a slope. Depending on your speed, one may not be enough to stop your cart, but two usually is. Unless you have some huge hill you've just come down, your cart will always stop on two unpowered booster rails. So this is the next station. Third station is basically opposite. It's a valley instead of a hill. So instead of a sensor on each side, you have one in the middle. So as you come in, you go over this booster that's really meant to push you going out, but you stop on the downhill, you can then break your cart and get off, or push the button and continue on your way. The one slightly nicer thing about this is the button is now mostly in front of you instead of back over your shoulder as it is in the hill version. But similarly, when you push the button, it powers the redstone, which sends you on your way, and the button may not last long enough to get you up on the other hillside, and that's what the sensor here is for. It will last long enough for you to go the 2 boosters. And it works just like this. So before I mentioned about splitting two-way traffic into separate lines, and we have an example of that right here. This is a station that gives a different starting point for each direction. So if you want to go that way, you put your cart here, get in, and push the button that's right in front of you. If you want to go this way, you put your cart here, get in, push the button you want to go, and you'll keep going on your way. Yeah, I should mention these hill station and valley station, if you want to go, you just put your cart so that when it goes downhill, it'll be going in the direction you want to go. And you get in and push the button. Same thing on the valley station. If you want to go, in this case to my right, I would put it on the left side. If I want to go to the left, I put it on the right side. The hill is a little more logical in that if you want to go to the right, you put it on the right side. If you want to go to the left, you put it on the left side. So right here is the kind of arrangement that splits the traffic into basically one-way lines, and this is a two-way line here. So it normally looks something like this if you were to build it. And the way this works, if you don't know, carts coming up to a turn will always take the turn. But if they approach the backside of a turn, they'll just basically jump the track and continue straight. So in theory, I could also put another track like this, and coming this way, you would jump the track and go this way, but you'd still follow around the corner, coming this way or this way. So using the principle of corner jumping, carts coming this way go up this double booster, carts coming this way will skip over the corner and then be sent that way. And there's basically a very similar arrangement over here, which sends you over this way. So you can just get in, push the button, and you're sent on your way. Now this may look complex, and it is a little more complex than my previous stations. My previous stations were basically just go in one of two directions or get off. This station allows you to either get off right here or choose between one of 4 destinations. And you choose between the 4 destinations using these 2 levers, and when you've picked your direction to go, you press the button and you'll be sent on your way. Basically, you have 4 different directions. Here's labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4. And there's actual switch tracks. They're underneath these, or on top of these dark pieces of wood. And if you don't know how a switch track works, you make a T, and the T will naturally turn in one direction or the other. And then by applying redstone power to the curve or removing it, let's put the actual piece of redstone there. Yeah, there we go. So when it's powered, it turns one direction, and when it's unpowered, it turns the other direction. And the way it actually turns by default depends upon the orientation. Whether the open space is to the north, south, east, or west will determine the default. But you just, like I said, you put some redstone here, you figure out, oh look, it's naturally turning this way, and when I power it, it turns the other way. So I have 3 of those. One here, one here, and one here. And the way this is set up is this switch here controls the closer switch track. The wiring is all underneath. I'll show you that in a minute. The other switch controls both. You can see when I flip it, they both flip. So you basically have 4 different ways you can go, because this takes 1 to 2, and then these 2 take those 2 to 2 others for a total of 4. And so what I usually do is I label the one switch 1 and 2, and the other switch A and B. So you can see in this case the way it's wired up. If you want to go out to destination 1, you set the switches to B2. If you want to go to destination 2, you set it to B1. 3, you set it to A2. And 4, you set it to A1. So the way this all works is behind this wall here. Behind each of the switches there's a torch, and that powers a redstone, which then powers or depowers another torch, and then that sends a signal to this piece of redstone. And since this was the further back switch, it controls only the first switch track. So you can see the redstone comes over here, and it powers or depowers this torch that's underneath the one dark piece of wood. And now you can see why I have the dark pieces of wood, so it makes it really easy to tell where you need to put your torches. The other switch is very similar. It powers this strip of redstone wire, where it then powers this, and then has a kind of old style repeater just so that both these torches are on or off at the same time. Then it will power this one. And you may have noticed that this one had a slight delay. That's only because of the extra torch delay in it getting power. So when you flip this switch, you can see they both switch. So there's a booster track under here, and this, we use the repeater. If I use a normal piece of redstone here, those torches would turn it on and off, but the repeater blocks that from happening, and that sends a signal down to here, which turns on or off this torch, which is right below the booster track. So when you come over here and push the go button, you can see the booster track turns on. So I want to go to destination 4, so I'll set the switches to A1, put my cart down, get in, and push the button, and you're sent on your way. This is a very similar... Let me explain something first. When you come in to this station, if you tried to go through the switch tracks, you'd wind up at some crazy destination depending on where the switches were. So when you come in, I have it arranged so that you're shifted and bypass all of the switch tracks, and you wind up coming over here and getting on to this unpowered booster. So when you leave, you'll go through the switch tracks, but when you come in from any direction, you bypass the switch tracks and are sent right to the stopping / control point. So that's why I build these stations like this. This is basically the exact same station, but things are rearranged a little. I came upon this design when I had a place where there was 2 tracks crossing on level, and I wanted to put in a way to decide which way you want to go. So with that, I came up with this design. So basically you have, this is the first switch, and then these 2 are the other 2 switch tracks, and all the other corners don't move. Actually slightly arranged differently, as the closer switch is now controls that, but it doesn't really matter in the big scheme of things. You can see that this one controls the other 2 corners. What is a little different here is, you can see there's very much less stuff behind the wall, and this kind of uses what I call the clean wall wiring. Basically, you just have torches on the switches, and you just have a little spot of redstone right below them. What you do have is a repeater buried directly under the wall in the floor, and that picks up the power. Let's turn this one on. The power from this spot of redstone and transmits it to this side, and because this block gets fully powered, it actually transmits the power down as well and powers the redstone wire here. So you basically hide the repeater under the wall in the middle of the floor. There is another one right here. I'll break that block there to show you. It is there. And it makes the wiring a lot cleaner. But that was only the switches. You can see these run over to these torches. The booster, it's powered from this little spot of redstone, which, because it's directly below the button, when you push the button, it gets powered. And that's how this station works. Here we have another minecart dispenser, and that also acts as the backing block. So if you don't have a cart, you can just press the button here, set your switches up. Let's go in that direction and push the button to go. You can see I have a loop over here, but that's just for a demonstration. Though you can go as far as you want. Those are meant to be two separate exits for this station. So the next station I'm going to show you is a much simpler two-direction version of those two stations, and it's right here. And this, instead of running all the wiring underground, we run the wiring up on top of these blocks here, and this torch is actually what controls this turn track, which way it turns. So you can see as the torch goes on and off, track turns left or right, and again we just have a spot of redstone here, and the button will send you on your way. The next station here is actually not really one of my designs. I actually saw someone else's YouTube channel. They had a station like this, and this is a three-way station, and you actually come across this pretty often if you don't have a full 4 directions, but you don't have 2 directions. And the way this works is you basically have buttons for left or right, or at least in the case from here, this is straight and left, this is left and right, and this is straight and right. And the way this works is you need 4 tracks past the turn in each direction. Then each direction also gets a sensor rail, and then you have 2 booster rails to stop the cart on a small little hill you build. And you put maybe 1 booster on the other side if you need little speed to get up and over the little stop area. But the way these work is you press the button and it presses or powers the little spot of redstone underneath, and in this case you can see it then through the booster, it will, or the repeater, it picks up the power and powers the block that the booster is on, so the booster gets powered. And you may be thinking, well, this doesn't look that great, we got redstone all over the place. And well, what you can do is you take half blocks, any type of half block, and you can actually cover this whole area with half blocks. Everything except for the track and for these little spots of redstone. Everything else can be covered with half blocks, and it looks really nice, and you don't see any of the wiring. Alright, so you can see that this curve here turns naturally to the left in this direction. So in that case, for the left button here, you just need to connect the spot to this block. But if it one of the 2 sides needs to also, because what happens is if you come this way, you need something so that the sensor rail should power these 2 for long enough for you to get over, but for a little extra security, you can have the booster also be picked up by these repeaters and also power, so that will make sure it will be powered long enough so you're over the whole hill. And you only need to do that on one side. You can see it's not done on this side, it is done on this side. It doesn't really matter which side you do it on. You don't need to do it on both. You can. It won't cause any harm. It just takes an extra repeater that you don't need. But if you want to go straight in this case, like you want to do if you push this button, you need to get that to flip. And the way that is done is there's a second repeater that's set to 4 that will pick up, and that will then power a repeater that powers the block that the switch track is on, and that's also set on 4. So what that does is a total of 2 sets of 4, or a total of 8 ticks, which is 8/10 of a second. So basically, the booster track will be powered, sending the minecart on its way, and then 8/10 of a second later, this will flip, which basically results in it flipping just before you get to it, which is exactly what you want. If it flipped too early, such as if you had these on 1, it would actually flip back before you passed over it, and you would not go in the direction you wanted. All 3 are identical, basically, except on here it's the other side that needs to flip if you want to go to the left. So for these 2 sides, you can see we also have the repeater set on 4, and they just route the power underneath and into this repeater. So I'll show you how that works. You get on it, I'll go straight, head on our way, it flips, we go over, and we go through here. If you can't see what this is actually a level crossing. It doesn't matter if you're going left or right or north or south or east or west. Assuming there was a person in the cart, you'd have enough speed, and no matter which way you're going, you cross through this and out the other side. This is actually one of the harder things to build because of the way trying to get all the curves to curve the right way. It's not really difficult, it's just a little tedious to get them all curving the way you want them to. So I'll get back in this cart, and we'll go through here over to the next station. And this is actually my hill station on a timer. So basically, as you enter, you set off these little set of repeaters, so you have about 3 seconds to get off, and if you don't actually get off, you'll be sent on your way again. So this is also the same thing, but now instead of using lots of repeaters, I have a little loop of glass that the pistons push around, and there's one wood block. So when the wood block gets to right behind this repeater, it will power, and you'll be sent on your way. And once it moves then to the next block, it stops. The advantage of this is it's more controllable. You can it uses less repeaters, but you get a much larger delay. The kind of downside is it also uses up more room, but you can bury this underneath the station or in a wall or under a floor or something. But it basically is right now the way it's set. It uses about half the repeaters and actually has twice as long delay, and you can actually increase that by just increasing 1 or 2 of these repeaters, and it gets basically multiplied by like 12 because that's the number of blocks in the loop. But I'll show you how that actually I have a test button. Basically, as you come in, there's a little sensor that senses that you came in. There's one on both sides, and this is a little edge detector, so even though you may be over that for, let's say, half a second, this will only emit a small pulse. I'll press the button to show how that works. So you get a small pulse, and the pulse keeps going around and around in the circle, setting off the pistons in turn. And you'll see, here comes the wood block. As the wood block gets behind the little booster there, the repeater, it turns on the boosters, and then when it gets to the next spot, it stops again. So if you're riding the cart, it kind of works like this. You have plenty of time to get off, or you can set here, it's about 6 seconds, I believe. And we'll be sent on our way now. Okay, I usually like making the stations, like I showed you before, the four-way stations, where you skip around past the switch tracks and instead just go to the control/stopping place. But some people think it looks a little messy because you got lots of tracks and it uses a bunch of space. So this is a design that has only one switch track, and you go through it no matter which way you come. You can see it's right now switched the wrong way around, so how do we stop? Well, when you approach, you came over this sensor track, and I'll put a cart down on it right now, and you can see as soon as that's activated, the switch track switches towards us, and the sensor tracks work like buttons in which they're on for almost a second, so as long as you're going at a decent speed, it'll still be flipped the right way when you actually move over the 2 more blocks to the switch, and that directs you into the station. Well, you can still flip this with the little lever here, and the same thing happens if the lever is up and it's turned the wrong way and you're coming this way. When you go over it again, it turns the right way, so you stop at the station. So how's it done? Well, we have a sensor basically at each side, and your switch here is kind of the same hidden in the wall thing, but the switch powers a torch, and this torch then controls the torch that is under the switch track. And this is done, well, for 2 reasons. You can see that this torch is not being powered, and so it's on. So that will, when the cart comes over here, I can then just power the block that the torch is on to turn the torch off. But if I flip the switch so it's this way, well, now the torch is already being powered to turn it off, and if I'm coming from this direction, I now need to turn that torch on so that the curve is the right way. But I need to turn the torch on by turning off this power. So that is why we have a torch over here. This block, or this sensor, which powers this line, can provide power to this block, which turns off this torch, so that this torch will turn on. So it's kind of a little 2-step process when you're coming from here. And that's the simplest way I figured out to wire these. So it is a little more wiring underneath, where it was basically, in my 4-way stations, it was basically just wire the lever up to the torch underneath the switch track. This kind of has a indirect, because you may need to basically turn off the signal from this lever, but it seems to work. I also made a 4-way version of this station. It's a little bigger. It's right over here. Since we have little cart sensors, I just put some note blocks here basically for decoration. But this is it. There's one central switch track, and then either side of it is another switch track, and it's basically wired the same way. But now you have 3 copies of that little circuit instead of just one. So in this case, this is the first switch, and this one controls the other 2 switch tracks. Basically, this comes down, and here's basically the first torch, which then comes over this way and powers this torch. But this torch can be turned off by this sensor block, and if it is off, it can be turned on by this sensor block so that this flips the right way. Basically the same schema, but it's backwards because the direction is turned around 90 degrees on the switch track, so that this one will turn the torch off if it's on, and this one will turn off the torch that powers the torch on if it is, or yeah. So it's a little more complex wiring underneath, but it's a little cleaner on top. I think you can make these slightly closer. I just made them a little further apart so you can more easily see what the wiring is like underneath. So that's it for my basic stations. I have some other examples. This is a hill. I believe it goes up 64 blocks, and you can see I have one booster track and then 3 normal tracks. So it's basically one booster for every 4 tracks. And having it that way, you easily make it to the top. It's a little slow between boosters as you're just catching the edge of the next booster, but you do make it up. You could put more boosters than this, but you need at least one every 4. If you put more, it's just wasting gold and redstone, which in survival mode is precious, but make it all the way up and down is not a problem, as you can see. Now other people like to use 2 boosters in a row, so I did some tests of that, and that's right over here. You can see here we have 2 boosters and then 6 regular tracks, so you can see it's basically doubling that, so it's 2 boosters every 8, and it turns out that that's not quite enough. You go up, I think you can get to the second one, but going to the third one you don't have quite enough speed and you'll go back down the hill. So the other thing I did then is I made it 2 every 7. So this is slightly less efficient, but you do wind up making it to the top. It's slightly less efficient than the 1 every 4. But some people like this kind of arrangement. And again, you're just making it to the next. Ooh, didn't quite make it that time. If you have a little speed, you'll make it. So if I go over this booster here, a little more speed that time, and you see I'm now. Oop. I guess maybe it depends on how laggy your server is, if you make it or not. So definitely the 1 every 4 makes it. It looks like 2 every 6 will definitely make it. 2 every 7 apparently just makes it or not, depending on how laggy your server is. And let's fix that piece of dirt. So that's a kind of example of going up hills. I showed you before how you can split a 1-way track into 2-way track, and you can recombine them. Let's break that so we can put that down there. So this is a 1-way in each direction, and this either track on either side would be a 2-way track, and you can actually run long runs of these 1-way in each direction tracks, and it just depends on how you have it. If you drive on the right hand side or the left hand side, if you're English or American or whatever, it's something like that. So I do have one other thing to show you, but it's basically the most complex station I've made. Actually, this is this is it. It's huge. Really, half of it, this half back here, you can build underground, and it's really a little obsolete now that the boosters can dispense carts right onto tracks. But basically, what this is this is a station that allows you to pick one of 6 destinations. This is using Pear Squirrel Selector. You can find his videos on YouTube. This is a 6 destination version. I've made one as big as 15. That's as big as you can make them before you have to actually do some complex stuff to connect them all up. But really, this is from this block over to these pistons and then back is the selector. The stuff above is just to light the indicator lights, and then stuff behind here is just to get the signal out and to change the track as appropriate. But basically this lets you come, press a button to pick a destination, the light lights up, and tracks behind here will switch. You can then get in your cart here, press the button, and you'll come over here, and you see I had the 5th button pressed. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can see this has flipped around the other way. So you'll come out this 5th track. Coming back in, you're directed over here, and you're directed into this little destination hut. Not really sure what you call it. But basically this is designed so that you get out of your cart, you don't break your cart, but as you exit the door, it automatically collects your cart and stores it for another user. So what happens is there's a piston here, a little block of wood, and as you exit there's a pressure plate that opens the door and simultaneously pulls the piston back and then closes it so you can't fall in the hole. But what does happen is your cart falls down and then goes over these little boosters, and the boosters on this track are close enough that even with no one riding it unmanned, it'll go around to the destination. And I'll show you what that is right now. And we get in the cart, get boosted up this hill in the little hut. Not sure if you saw that, but it basically says just walk out the door, do not take the cart. You just get out. You can see really quickly the cart falls, comes down here, falls along the track all the way over here, and all this part can be underground, but comes past here, activates a little sensor, and stops right there. Now you can see some stuff happening in the background. When I activated that little sensor, it activates, this is basically a giant counter circuit. You can see there's 2 spots left where carts can stop, and we have 2 wood blocks here which indicate those empty spaces. So when a cart passes over this sensor, after about a second it causes this loop of glass and wood to rotate clockwise 1 spot. You can see there's more pistons on here than you would normally see on the piston loop, and that's because besides rotating clockwise, this whole thing can also rotate counterclockwise. And that happens when you get in your cart and go. So I'm just going to break this cart because I'm not going to actually be riding in it. But if you got in the cart and press the button here to go, besides going, you call the next cart, which forwards and advances each cart on the group, and then once that reaches the end, it signals that whole counter to rotate to say that, hey, now we have 3 empty spots for carts. And this is actually built to be safe, so if this whole thing fills up and there's no more wood blocks indicating no more empty spaces, this torch turns off, which turns this switch track so that any other carts coming in don't crash and mess up this machine. They just come over here and get dumped at the too many carts dump. Similarly, it's set up so that if there are no carts available and you leave on the last cart, it won't rotate this past here. So basically you can't get it to say there's -1 carts or something like that. The wood will only go as far as this block. So basically this whole section here can be underground and underneath here, so you come here, you pick your destination, you get in your cart, and push the button to go. You head off on your nice trip, and meanwhile all the carts move forward, so there's a cart available for the next person. That's basically an explanation of all my kind of station designs. I hope you found it informative. I guess I'll see you in my next video. Have a good night.